As we all know, market has changed significantly after Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. There are a lot of enterprises who are evaluating Kubernetes as a replacement for VMware. And as they embark on this journey, many crucial questions emerge. Is OpenShift virtualization truly a step forward, or is different kind of lock-in? What about Nutanix? What is the role of AI in the OpenShift ecosystem? Is bare metal really challenging with Kubernetes? We will go deeper into these questions with Rob Hirschfeld, CEO and co-founder RackN, who will be heading to Red Hat Summit to engage with customers and ecosystem players, and he will have to answer some of these questions there. Rob, it's good to have you on the show.
Swap, it's a pleasure as always.
Red Hat Summit is almost here, and you folks, RackN, will be attending the summit. You will have a good presence there. Talk a bit about this summit, the importance of this summit for the ecosystem, and RackN's presence at this event.
I'd be happy to. That's a tall order. It's interesting because one of the challenges that the industry has is there aren't as many shows where, enterprises can come together to talk about running infrastructure, core IT operations, and with a really practical hands-on sense. And, we're seeing OpenShift Summit, Red Hat Summit, they include Ansible in this, all become this, sort of gathering place where enterprises are going to be able to get the skills, talk about what they're doing, share challenges about core enterprise IT concerns. It's a really exciting opportunity. And I think it's important not to underestimate just how much those gatherings occur. When we deal with enterprise customers and we work with, a broad spectrum of Fortune 1000 companies, they don't have a lot of places they can go to learn to do a better job, to plan for the future and think about what's going. They're either stuck in an analyst conference or a cloud conference, and neither of those really help them with the hands-on pieces. For us, while we do a lot with different Red Hat components, we're really focused for this year on OpenShift virtualization and really helping companies, build a virtualization practice on top of Red Hat and Red Hat capabilities. This year at the summit, RackN is going to have a significant group of people there, including myself, of course, where we are going to be able to get very deep on OpenShift virtualization, really showing people not just how to set up and use OpenShift virtualization, but how to create VMs, how to move their estate over into that type of infrastructure in a way that drives them into production, right? There's a huge amount of urgency because of VMware and Broadcom to find alternatives and to move into an OpenShift virtualization. You have to have confidence that you can productize this. And that's what RackN's all about. That's what our booth is really focused on. Now, we do also have our experts in Red Hat and Red Hat operating systems, people who want to do things like use container Linux, want to investigate doing some of the new boot techniques, advanced security with RHEL, secure boot, Ansible automation platform integrations. My goodness, we integrate with Red Hat in so many different ways. It's actually really exciting to find people who want to talk about those components and how the systems fit together. And that's really what our presence at the show is all about. It's really talking to enterprise operators and finding ways that they can do a better job making their better metal estate serve the rest of what they build.
And I'm pretty sure that this year, of course, AI will be one of the hottest topics, but I'm also quite confident that there will be a lot of discussions around the whole VMware fiasco after the Broadcom acquisition, where people are looking at alternatives. So there will be a lot of discussion about OpenShift, Kubernetes as an alternative to VMware. When a CEO walks to your booth or when a CEO walks to your team and they ask questions regarding Kubernetes as a replacement for VMware, what kind of questions you expect that folks will be asking? What kind of discussions will be there around this topic there at the show?
And this is really important, and I can address both AI and virtualization pieces. They are top of mind for enterprise customers. For virtualization, the question isn't, can I run VMs? It's really, can I tune, operate, optimize? How much of my workloads can I bring over? How do I deal with lifecycle changes? One of the things Red Hat is really telling customers right now is to look at using their advanced cluster manager as a way to bootstrap all these clusters, which is a way we fully support. What we found in talking to our enterprise customers is they want to move even faster than that. And so they're looking at building OpenShift clusters as standalone clusters and then integrating Advanced Cluster Manager. So what we're finding is it's a very powerful story to know that you can install, deploy, and tune the virtualization components in OpenShift super quickly. And you have to recognize, and this is what I would tell the CIOs and leaders, and this is what we do tell all the leaders in our customers, is the faster you can iterate through those cycles, the better, right? Every customer is going to have a learning curve where they don't just learn how to use OpenShift virtualization. They actually have to learn how to migrate machines. They have to learn how to buy the right gear and tune the right gear and make sure it's set up correctly. Those things are going to be experimental for all customers because we're all moving so quickly. That is the essence of what RackN is helping our customers do. It's that fast turn cycles. It's how quickly you can set up, iterate, bring in the learnings across the industry and improve your operations. That's really the struggle that we have to get this operation moving. And at the same time, OpenShift virtualization has things that it needs to add: storage and networking capabilities, isolation and multi-tenancy, VM management capabilities, right? There's a lot of components here that Red Hat is going to be iterating on very quickly. And so it's not just a question of, can I use OpenShift virtualization? It's, can I build it in a way that continues to evolve over the next several years as capacities come online? You asked about artificial intelligence also, and I would expand on that. What we see with AI is that it's much more of a bare metal story than most companies are ready to do. Companies' current OpenShift platform and OpenShift teams are really used to working in virtualization or working in cloud. What we're talking about both in OpenShift virtualization and in AI is that those are bare metal stories: RAID, BIOS, configuration, storage, networking. Even things like DNS and certificate management are all absolutely critical to get right and be able to dynamically update. As the systems evolve, you have to be able to manage bare metal infrastructure in a very dynamic way, in ways that a lot of companies aren't used to doing. And that's another place where we really enjoy having this conversation of helping companies rethink what their approach to the bare metal layer of infrastructure has to shift to. In both cases, it really needs to be dynamic, fast, API driven. It has to be autonomic. All of these pieces really have to come together for companies to pursue AI, whether it's inferencing or training. And all of these things have to come together for them to build virtualization infrastructure under OpenShift. So really critical components. And what we do is bare metal, so we're well positioned to have those conversations.
Now, can you also talk about how is OpenShift seen when it comes to comparing, Kubernetes as a replacement for VMware?
When companies are looking at virtualization, and we've had a lot of really great conversations with our customer base and our prospects about this, the first assumption was that people would replace VMware with another virtualization platform. And there are some virtualization platforms out there to consider. What we're seeing is customers are looking at a Kubernetes-based replacement for VMware as a strategic alternative. We see nearly complete acceptance of Kubernetes as a development platform and as a workload platform in customers. And so the idea that they can also use that from an infrastructure perspective is very exciting. And it's a strategic component. The challenge gets into, it isn't a infrastructure platform, right? It's not a virtualization platform at the moment. And so there's some growth needed for this. So what we see is it has shaken up the decision process quite a bit, and customers who had assumed that they would go from VMware to another virtualization platform are looking at their workload split and then reevaluating that they might be able to use OpenShift as a foundational layer for some or potentially all of their virtualization needs over time. One thing to note that's really important here is that that doesn't mean that we're just going to run Kubernetes on bare metal. So we started this journey expecting OpenShift and Kubernetes to just eliminate the virtualization layer. And what we found more and more is that for developer workloads where they're very dynamic and they're used to running in VMs, they still want to run in VMs. So the assumption that really is getting challenged here is that it's not Kubernetes running everywhere. It's actually layers of Kubernetes. And that's the interesting observation here, is that you might have a Kubernetes virtualization layer that's managed by an infrastructure team or a virtualization team as their asset. And then the developers, instead of just bypassing virtualization altogether, are going to consume virtualization for Kubernetes also. And you're just going to have two different layers in this case, instead of just eliminating virtualization altogether. That to me was an aha when we really started listening to what customers wanted. They didn't want to just eliminate virtualization. They wanted to keep it in place, but have a better solution so that they would have, maybe OpenShift up and down all over their stack. It's a platform consolidation play rather than a virtualization removal play.
If, and I'm not judging anyone, but if enterprises do plan to migrate to OpenShift virtualization, would it be just like, changing your you can say your luggage from one hand to other hand, Red Hat versus VMware? It's more like there is a risk of, they're moving to another VMware, in a sense.
I'm glad you're asking that question. Enterprises really do need to be very reflective on the idea that they trust Red Hat today, but they trusted VMware 5 years ago. And so there is always this concern about, am I, fixing one vendor problem and a lock-in problem and switching to another vendor lock-in problem? And it's a very real question that companies should ask. And at the same time, they don't have a lot of time to evaluate tons of alternatives, right? There's a benefit to having a trusted vendor and moving these forward. What we really see here is part of the thing that got people locked into VMware was being overly dependent on having VMware own the whole stack, and VMware being, sort of a completely locked in, when they buy a VMware appliance or they buy VMware in a very specific configuration, that gets them very locked into VMware. What you can do is you can look at bringing Red Hat in and using it very deeply so that you can move quickly without being as dependent on Red Hat. If you can do things like have a bare metal abstraction layer so that you could bring in other vendors, you can bring in other OpenShift, other Kubernetes players or other virtualization vendors. If you don't lock into the automation layer around how you create VMs as only doing it through one vendor or one way. So, the key here is to really look at having some other vendors in play, keeping some mix and match in your environment, but building abstraction layers very intentionally in how you look at the systems. And that's something that we really advocate for with our customers, that we help them find places where they can create a really strong abstraction. We know at the hardware OEM level, right, the Dell, HP, Lenovo, Supermicro, et cetera, when you look at those layers, if you can swap out the OEMs, then it saves you a lot of money. It creates more supply chain independence. It might protect you from tariffs. Those abilities to create an abstraction are really important. If you're going to look into how do I adopt OpenShift virtualization as a VMware replacement, what you want to do is figure out how do you separate out how I create and manage VMs in that environment and make sure that that is multi-vendor. That'll help you both migrate off of VMware so you don't have to be locked into VMware vRealize or the ARIA suite anymore. But it's also going to help you if you say, you know what, I'm going to get my VMware estate down to 20% of what it was and then switch that to Nutanix or another alternative that might be able to handle very high performant workloads that OpenShift can't handle. And so the idea here is that you really do want to have a multi-vendor strategy. That doesn't mean you have to operate every vendor simultaneously. You want to be able to say, I'm going to go all in on migrating as many workloads off of VMware into OpenShift virtualization as I possibly can, as quickly as I can right now. We are helping customers do that every day of the week. The side effect, though, is that when you reach a certain threshold, you might then add in a second vendor to get VMware completely out of your premises, or you might be happy with VMware as it is. It's not a matter of going 100% over like we had been with Broadcom. It is coming back and saying, I want a ratio where I'm going to maintain multiple vendors. Our most successful customers who run reverse auctions and keep multiple vendors in place do not pick one vendor. They don't run a reverse auction and go with the winner. They actually run a reverse auction and they pick a 70%, a 20%, and a 10% vendor. That keeps multiple vendors in their environment with a very intentional ratio. They have preferred, but they are always able to change those ratios because they maintain a multi-vendor footprint. And customers need to plan the same thing. It's incredibly important to have a preferred and maintain alternates. And we help people do that all the time.
You also created a flowchart showing Nutanix as an interesting alternative. Why is not a simple default?
Nutanix isn't a simple default in part because it has some cost advantage and it has definitely some vendor advantages over VMware, but it really requires customers who are doing a VMware replacement to embrace Nutanix fully. And there are places where Nutanix from a storage or architecture perspective don't match as well to VMware. And so once you start asking your question about, hey, wait a minute, what architectures do I want to consider? How do I want to look at this? We're really seeing customers say, wait a second, I'm so invested in Kubernetes as a container platform. I have expertise with that rather than learning a new platform to replace VMware. What if I extended the platforms I'm already on? And that is Red Hat OpenShift by and large. We do see customers looking at other Kubernetes alternatives as an alternative for this. The thing that I would say that's really important for enterprise customers is they do want a supported, trusted partner, right? The idea of just going for a pure open source play where they can't get support and they don't have all of the depth that they want to have in the market is really important, right? When we're dealing with bare metal is complex. It's challenging. There's RAID and BIOS concerns. There's support concerns. Things are evolving very quickly. Those are places where you really do need a trusted partner to make sure that you are able to keep up with how things are going. And enterprises really don't have the time and they don't want to invest in building teams to do things that aren't really value-added work. And those are, a vendor's going to help you bootstrap into an automated system, fully automated data center infrastructure. Those are places where you can really move much more quickly by having a partner who's providing the support for you.
Are there any gaps with the OpenShift virtualization that customers still have to deal with, and those you see as a challenge as well?
I'm glad you're asking in that, we do see OpenShift virtualization while it's moving quickly isn't a direct replacement for VMware. Nothing's a direct replacement for VMware from a capabilities and performance perspective. So we do see people evaluating OpenShift virtualization, working on how do I manage storage, externalized storage, attaching VMs, and building that topology out. Networking is also something that is, network segmentation, network isolation. Those are not as simple. They're not as direct, and there isn't an easy parallel based on all of the ways that we've gotten used to VMware isolating networking. So those are both really important. Even more simply, though, VM management is, we're used to ClickOps, and sometimes people use this as a deriding term or a negative term. But the teams that are running your VMware infrastructure aren't ready to do command line interfaces using, kubectl to build manifests that then, go get reconciled into VMs or use GitOps to manage VM fleets. That's a really big lift. So having a UX and a dashboard that allows customers to manage that is really important. And those are just not as sophisticated in OpenShift virtualization as customers are used to in the architecture. And so all of those VM management, storage, and networking really do need to come a long way. The nice thing is that a lot of workloads that companies have don't need all of those pieces yet, or only need some of them. So we're going to solve these incrementally, and you're going to see initial workloads come over quickly, and then we'll build in a series of workloads as the tooling comes around. Backup tooling is already showing up from a virtualization perspective, an OpenShift virtualization perspective. VM migration tooling is starting to show up and making that more attractive. So what we're seeing is an ecosystem evolving around those pieces. What I would caution people to do is not assume that OpenShift virtualization is going to be managed and run by your development teams. Right, they're doing the development work. They're the platform teams. They've got their own use cases. What I would encourage people to do is look at OpenShift virtualization as a virtualization team system, as a platform, as a product for them. That they have tools and needs, they have infrastructure requirements, and separate those concerns. It'll actually let you go much, much faster if you are very direct and say, okay, I know my virtualization team has this skills, these experience, these expectations. Let's work directly with them. Let's not try to make them into developers or platform engineers or SREs. And that's, to me, the thing that really is going to break through this system, is not thinking that if I'm using OpenShift or Kubernetes to run virtualization, I've now got a development team extension. These are separate teams. They have separate needs. Infrastructure is its own challenge. Managing infrastructure and operating systems still required. And that expertise, if you respect it in your organization, will actually let you move much more quickly. And you'll find out the real bottlenecks in building an OpenShift virtualization system, or frankly, an AI inferencing system. Let those things be real capabilities, and don't brush them under the table as because the tool was really written for developers. We're going to have to fix those problems. We're going to have to add the capabilities in for those teams.
And since you mentioned AI, and we started talking about AI at the beginning as well, what kind of AI angle is there for OpenShift?
This is something I'm really looking forward to seeing at the OpenShift Summit specifically. Red Hat has been doing a really good job helping developers use models to then build applications. Now, this is pretty far from where we've been talking, but there's a lot of capability that needs to be surfaced to help a developer, an application builder, do a better job using models in their workflows, in their application capabilities. And Red Hat's been doing a fantastic job building libraries and capabilities into their platforms for empowering developers to use LLMs and AI and machine learning. All that's super important. So I see that occurring very naturally within the Red Hat ecosystems, above what we're talking about, which is really all infrastructure. And then once you have those tools and capabilities going, then you need to actually start executing them at scale and pulling the tooling that Red Hat has been doing a good job building into, your Kubernetes clusters, as a deployment model. And there you have to be able to expose, manage, and update GPUs as part of this whole process, or manage machine workloads as a better ingress model, or potentially if you're doing training or small scale training, actually manage training across a fleet of machines. So there's a lot of scheduling and capabilities that are also being built into Kubernetes. And those will be surfacing in OpenShift also. So it's a lot of interlocking pieces here. The fact that Red Hat is working at the front of that pipeline to really empower developers to do better AI development on self-managed, on-premises enterprise IT, that's a key breakthrough. And customers should get really excited about that. Anybody doing IT operations, IT development should be really excited to watch all the support they're getting from there. It's coming down the line on how people buy and select infrastructure. It's not all the way there yet, and I'll be watching at the show to see where, what people are asking for from that perspective.
And the common theme when I talk to you is that bare metal and Kubernetes, they're not necessarily like oil and water, but still, it's a bit challenge. So why is bare metal so hard with Kubernetes?
Bare metal and Kubernetes are not as easily connected as it would be great to see. And you're right to point that out. The challenge has been Kubernetes was really designed as a container management infrastructure for cloud infrastructure. So they make assumptions, anything that's cloud first, cloud native, as Kubernetes likes to say it is, has built-in assumptions that a lot of the infrastructure work is being done for you. Network isolation, storage, right? It's all of these core components are part of packaging a workload in a virtual machine that you've historically gotten because you used an abstraction layer. When you start bringing in bare metal into that, it doesn't have the abstraction layer. So if you're doing a bare metal system, you have to deal with the networking that you have. You have to deal with the storage that you have on the machine, or that you have to set up attachment points and connect to that storage. You have to be able to set the RAID and BIOS configuration and get it installed and configured correctly. If you're doing GPUs, those have to be patched and upgraded and managed, right? If they fall off the bus, they have to be fixed and picked back up. And you then have to actually get the operating systems installed and running correctly on all these pieces. And most Kubernetes assume that you have a very specific operating system with a cloud init or an immutable image. All of that has to be managed on bare metal. So none of those things are default bare metal capabilities. They all have to be embedded and managed. And then you can go even a step further, because the assumption in cloud infrastructure is that it has a high rotation rate. You don't upgrade or patch. You destroy a VM and you get a new one, and then you add that one back into the cluster. That whole pattern means if you're talking about bare metal, you actually have to recondition a bare metal machine to put it back into service and into the cluster. That requires a tremendous amount of AI, of automation and controls, and frankly, resilience. A lot of industry standard for resilience, without the one people who don't use RackN tell us they have a 20% dropout rate on a provisioning recycle, right? We see we see 99% or higher as a reset place. But if you're losing machines when you reset them, and you have a system like Kubernetes that expects you to reset them all the time, then that actually creates a fair bit of operational turbulence that you have to deal with. So there's a number of capabilities where you can make Kubernetes work on bare metal very smoothly, but it requires a lot of underlying infrastructure to provide that type of cloud-like bare metal experience. I mean, it's what RackN does. It's sort of our hallmark for how we work.
Rob, once again, thank you so much for joining me today, and of course talk about alternatives for VMware, and of course about the Red Hat Summit. Thank you so much. I will look forward to chat with you again after Red Hat Summit to get your perspective on how was the summit according to you. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.